I should have listened to everyone who warned me not to go camping alone. My friends always said it was too dangerous, especially for a woman on her own in a remote area. But I was stubborn and craving solitude. I thought I needed a quiet weekend away from everything, deep in the woods where no one would bother me. Looking back now, I realize how naive I was. It was late October when I drove up into the mountains with my car packed full of gear. The air was crisp and the forest was empty, exactly what I wanted. I found a little clearing off an old fire road near a trailhead that was basically abandoned this time of year. No other cars, no other people. Perfect, or so I thought. I spent the afternoon setting up camp. I'd pitched my tent in a flat spot between tall pines and started a small fire to make some coffee. The silence out there was heavy, but I tried to enjoy it. I remember sitting on a log, sipping from my tin mug, and convincing myself that the uneasy feeling pricking at me was just first night jitters. It's normal, I thought, to feel a bit jumpy when you're alone in unfamiliar woods. Every crackle from the fire and whisper of wind through the branches felt amplified. I told myself to relax. As dusk fell, the woods faded from gold to gray to nearly black. I had a good book and a lantern, and I wrapped myself in a flannel sleeping bag to read by the fire until I got sleepy. The night was moonless and starry, beautiful in a way I had only ever read about. Around 10 p.m., I decided to turn in. I doused the fire and double-checked that my food was hung up a safe distance away. Then I crawled into my tent and zipped it up tight. The pale glow of my lantern cast shadows on the nylon walls. I felt a small pang of anxiety as I clicked the light off, plunging everything into darkness. I took a deep breath and closed my eyes. I don't know what time it was when I heard the first noise. I woke up to a faint crunching sound outside, like footsteps slowly stepping on dried leaves. Half asleep, I held my breath and listened. The sound stopped. The forest was silent, except for my own heartbeat thudding in my ears. I wondered if I had dreamed it. Maybe it was just an animal, a deer snuffling around, or a raccoon. I checked the time on my phone. It was just after 2 a.m. I remember a surge of fear mixed with confusion. Part of me wanted to call out, but I was terrified of what might answer back. I lay there, every muscle tense, straining to hear anything else. For a long time, there was nothing but the whoosh of my own blood in my head. Just when I was starting to convince myself it really was some small animal, and that I should calm down, I heard a new sound. The unmistakable, slow creak of foliage, like someone carefully shifting their weight not far from my tent. It was so deliberate, too quiet and controlled to be an animal. My mouth went dry. A branch snapped, loudly this time, and I practically jumped out of my skin. The sound was maybe 20 feet away, if I had to guess. I grabbed the first thing I could find, my flashlight, and fumbled to turn it on. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. I unzipped the inner layer of the tent door just a crack, just enough to poke my flashlight out and click it on. I swept the beam in a semicircle outside. Trees, bushes, the glint of my car's metal about 30 yards off through the trees. Nothing else. No reflection of eyes, no dark figure. Everything was silent, again. After a few minutes, I convinced myself that whoever, whatever it was, must have run off when they saw the light or heard me moving. Eventually, still trembling, I zipped the tent back up and sat there in the dark, knees pulled to my chest. It took what felt like hours for my adrenaline to die down. I think I eventually dozed off sometime before dawn, clutching my little pocket knife in one hand. Morning light brought a fragile sense of safety. Everything looked different in daylight, less menacing somehow. I emerged from the tent to a chilly, foggy dawn. The ground was damp with dew. Trying to shake off last night's terror, I made a small fire again to heat up water for instant oatmeal and coffee. I kept telling myself I was being silly. Maybe it really had been an animal. Or if it was a person, maybe some hiker who got curious or lost. But why wouldn't they have said something? The questions nagged at me, but I tried to dismiss them. As the sun rose higher, I decided to scout around the perimeter of my campsite just to ease my mind. At first, I didn't find anything unusual. But then, near a cluster of firs about 30 feet from my tent, I saw them. Footprints in the soft mud. They were unmistakably shoe prints, large, like a man's boot, and they definitely weren't mine. I had been wearing hiking shoes with a distinct waffle pattern, these were different. A heavy lug sole. They looked fresh too, edges of the impression still sharp in the damp earth. My stomach sank. Someone had been there, circling my campsite while I slept. A wave of cold realization rolled through me. Those were the footsteps I heard in the night. I wasn't imagining it. And whoever it was had been deliberate enough to avoid making noise most of the time. They had been watching me, maybe even standing right outside my tent at one point. The thought made me feel sick. I kicked dirt over the fire immediately, heart pounding with renewed anxiety. I wanted to leave, right then and there. I hurried to start breaking camp, hands shaking as I tried to dump out my coffee and pack my gear. Every rustle of the trees had me snapping my head around. I felt exposed and vulnerable in a way I'd never felt before. The whole time I was quietly berating myself. How could I be so stupid? Alone out here with no cell service. Nobody even knows exactly where I am. If something happened, if someone took me... I tried to push the thought away, but it kept coming back. If I got kidnapped out here, who would even know? They might never find me. I stuffed my tent and sleeping bag into the trunk haphazardly and went to start the car. My fingers were cold and clumsy as I fumbled the keys. I jumped in, locked the doors first thing, and then slid the key into the ignition. I remember whispering to myself, please, please. The engine rolled over but didn't catch. I tried again, pumping the gas, nothing but a sputter. Panic blossomed in my chest. I had this sudden intuition that it wasn't a coincidence. Could someone have tampered with my car? I had popped the hood and forced myself to get out and look, my eyes darting around the clearing. I didn't really know much about engines. Everything looked intact at a glance. I thought maybe the cold, damp air was making it hard to start, but the car was a reliable old 4Runner that had never given me trouble. Why now? I tried to steady my breathing. It's okay. I murmured to myself, the sound of my own voice oddly comforting in the stillness. You got this. Worst case, it's a long hike down to the highway. Maybe 10 miles of lonely dirt road back to the main route. I didn't relish it, but I could do it if I had to. Before committing to that trek, I decided to give the car one more try after a few minutes. To my immense relief, on the third attempt, the engine finally coughed to life. I nearly cried in gratitude. I hopped in and immediately spun the car around, eager to get the hell out of there. Gravel skittered and spat from under my tires as I turned onto the rutted dirt road that led back toward civilization. I was driving way too fast for those conditions, but adrenaline had a hold on me and I didn't care. Around a bend about a quarter mile from the campsite, I caught sight of something in the rearview mirror that made my blood run cold. A flash of movement, just a glimpse of a figure darting back from the road into the trees. It was so brief, I almost thought I imagined it. But I was pretty sure I saw someone step out onto the road behind me, maybe trying to chase after the car, only to hide when they realized I saw them. Even though I was moving fast, my heart somehow managed to pound even harder. They had been following me, possibly running after the car as I left. I kept glancing in the mirror, my foot pressing harder on the gas. The old 4Runner bounced and jolted on the washboard road. I felt every rock and pothole jarring through my bones, but fear pushed me onward. I expected at any second to see a truck S headlights in my rear view or hear gunshots taking out my tires. My imagination was in overdrive. The road stretched out, empty and dusty, twisting down through the woods. Each shadow between the trees looked like it could be concealing the person who'd been stalking me. After white-knuckling it for what felt like an eternity, I hit paved road and didn't stop until I saw the first gas station on the outskirts of a small town at the base of the mountain. I'd pulled in under the bright lights and finally exhaled the breath I'd been holding. I parked right in front of the glass doors of the convenience store, stumbled out, and practically ran inside. The cashier looked at me like I was a ghost, disheveled, wild-eyed, and shaking. I must have looked crazy, but he listened as I babbled that someone had been out there in the woods and that I thought I was being followed. To his credit, he called the local sheriff for me immediately. I remember holding a cup of water with both hands just to steady the tremble while waiting for the deputy to arrive. When he did, I could barely get my story straight. How do you explain to someone that you think a stranger was creeping around your tent in the middle of the night, possibly trying to abduct you? It sounded flimsy even to my own ears as I said it out loud, but I knew what I felt, and I had those boot prints as evidence something was off. The deputy was polite, but I could tell he was skeptical. He asked if maybe it could have been a hunter or camper who stumbled on my site and left when they realized someone was there. I didn't know how to answer. Sure, it could have been, but in my gut I was certain I was targeted. The way they moved quietly, the way they hung around so long, and what about my car struggling to start? I even showed him the photo on my phone of the footprints I found. He took a quick look and nodded, but I could tell it wasn't enough. He said they'd send a ranger or deputy up to check the area and advise me not to camp there alone again. That was it. There wasn't much else to do, unless something had actually happened to me. The reality of that sent a chill through me, basically, until I was harmed or missing. It wasn't really a case. I drove home in a daze that day. The adrenaline crash made me exhausted, but every time I started to drift off, I'd de-jerk awake thinking I heard a twig snapping or leaves rustling. The phantom sound of those careful footsteps outside my tent kept replaying in my mind. I haven't been able to sleep through a night since. I keep thinking about small details now, obsessing over them. Like how, when I arrived, I noticed an old beat-up truck driving slowly past the start of that dirt road. Its driver maybe eyeing me as I turned off. At the time, I figured they were just admiring the view or something. Now I wonder if that was the person who followed me up. Or how, when I was gathering firewood before dark, I thought I heard distant whistling deep in the forest, but convinced myself it was just a bird. All those little things that I ignored or explained away at the time now feel like clues I stupidly overlooked. I don't know who was out there or what exactly they wanted. Maybe it was just a local trying to scare off a camper from their private hunting land, but my gut tells me it was more than that. I can't stop imagining how it would have gone if I hadn't woken up when I did, or if I had stepped out of my tent unarmed, or if my car hadn't started. There are so many terrifying what-ifs. I was lucky, unbelievably lucky to get away. Someone was out there, stalking me through the darkness of the woods, and I was completely alone. I'm sharing this here because I need to get it off my chest, and I want to warn others, no matter how experienced you think you are, camping alone in remote places is not worth it. I wanted solitude, and I almost ended up disappearing forever. The fear that night hearing those careful footsteps approach, realizing someone could be inches away with God knows what intentions is a kind of terror I hope nobody else ever has to feel. I still hear those sounds every time I close my eyes. I doubt I'll ever go camping again, certainly not by myself. Next time I get the itch to get away from it all, I'll just stay home,